Right. So again, I'm an immigrant family. So both parents are working. So even as young as 8 years old, I'm coming home from school, and this may not be familiar to all younger listeners, but there was a thing called the latchkey kid. Where even as young as 8 years old, you would go home and you would get a key from the latch, hidden somewhere, and you would let yourself in. And I just remember this pit in my stomach feeling of opening that door, thinking, and again, this is part of what anxiety does. It generates scenarios in one's head about what could be happening. And my scenario as an 8-year-old was somebody broke in the house, they're ransacking the house, and as I open the door, I'm going to surprise them, and they're going to have to come down and take care of me, not in the good sense of take care of me. And so I would come home, let myself in, and if I heard a creak, it was an old house. If I heard a creak in the attic, I would go running back out to the front of the house out of fear that there was a burglar in the house. My sisters would come home and they were like, "What are you doing outside?" And I would come up with a cover story, like, "Oh, I just wanted to play. I just wanted to get some fresh air," because I could not admit to them. I didn't have the language or the ability to admit to them I'm feeling anxious.
That's an incredible intensity for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, I'm an intense kid.
But
this is what, if we don't actually recognize and name anxieties going on, we have to do something with it. And so we, again, either pray it away, prescribe it away, or in my case, highly function it away.
Yeah. In that context, in the book, you say Christians are not spiritual latchkey kids. That's, understanding it, that's a beautiful statement.
Yeah.
What do you mean by it?
What I mean by that is we don't have to come up with our own coping mechanisms to kind of make anxiety go away or to manage it. We actually have a father and a son, a family in God who is going to come home, and in fact already has made their home with us, and actually has made their home with us in anxiety. It's not like we have to get rid of anxiety and then we can be at home with the Father and the Son and the Spirit. Actually, the Father and the Son and the Spirit come to make a home with us in our anxiety. And this is the key thing that I'm trying to convey in the book. It's not that we need to push anxiety away, pray it away, or prescribe it away, and then we can get our act together enough to have a relationship with God. It's actually through anxiety, not away from it or around it, but actually through anxiety. That is where anxiety is actually the opportunity for spiritual growth. And that's the invitation for all Christians.
Curtis, even in the church, you have this dichotomy of people that are the glass is half full and those the glass is half empty. Unfortunately, the world and social media and news and cable news, and it is kind of aimed right to that anxiety and to amp it up.
That's right.
What's happening with that? I've described it like a can of something has been uncorked.
Yeah, that can is called smartphones and social media. So if you look at the research of Jonathan Haidt, a well-respected social psychologist, he's got a great book coming out very soon that just shows pretty persuasively that this hockey stick rise in anxiety, especially among teens and children, but adults in general, is pretty strongly correlated with the rise of smartphones and social media.
Wow.
Basically what's happening is we're getting bombarded with images that are designed algorithmically by the algorithm, to actually stoke anxiety, because it turns out that anxiety is a great driver for clicks.
It's sticky.
It's very sticky. You want to find the next thing. And so that's the external cause. And I think there's things we need to do as a society, as a church, to deal with the external drivers of anxiety. But I liken this to a storm, right? There's a storm that is caused by high weather patterns, pressure systems. That's like social media, technology, increasing isolation in our society. These are external factors we need to actually attend to. But if you think about a storm like Katrina, why did Katrina cause so much damage? Yes, there were these external factors, just like the equivalent to technology and social media. But the real damage was because the levees broke, right? The structures that we'd set up to deal with these external factors were not sufficient, were built on inadequate foundations. That's the message I'm trying to get out about anxiety. Yes, there are external causes, but the levees, the foundations, the biblical foundations that we have erected to deal with anxiety are built on flawed foundations. And that's what we need to address as well.
This Focus on the Family broadcast will continue in just a moment.
John Avery Whitaker is an incredible guy, but have you ever wondered what makes wit wit? Find out in the new Young Wit book series from Focus on the Family. In book number 1, 9-year-old John Avery Whitaker moves to a new town, makes new friends, faces a new bully, and solves a 70-year-old mystery. Young Wit and the Trader's Treasure is available at focusonthefamily.ca. That's shop.focusonthefamily.ca.
Financial Moments with Tom Copeland.
During the past year, interest rates have skyrocketed, resulting in substantially increased mortgage payments and other loan payments. And when you combine that with the cost of living increases, lots of people are struggling financially. We have a workshop series that can really help you deal with inflation and high interest rates from a biblical perspective. Commencing shortly, my experienced leaders will lead several small groups based on my book, Financial Management God's Way. It is through this in-depth study where we have seen the most significant permanent change in the way people manage money. This 12-week study is loaded with scriptures, and it's God through His Word and His Spirit that changes the way people manage money. There will be a particular emphasis on dealing with inflation and high interest rates from a biblical perspective during the 12-week series. The meetings will take place online, so it doesn't matter where you live. To learn more and to register, go to copelandfinancialministries.org. Again, copelandfinancialministries.org.
Thanks for listening to Focus on the Family. Let's resume now with the balance of today's programming.
Curtis, there again are things that we say within the Christian community that are both helpful and sometimes unhelpful. I think Philippians 4:6, I think you referred to it as the clobber verse. Describe what that, tell us what it is, and then why is it used as a
do not
club?
be anxious about anything. You know? And it's often used to actually portray anxiety as a sin, as something that you should not have, and that Paul's statement in Philippians 4:6 is like saying, don't be anxious, you shouldn't be anxious. I could almost hear my mom and my parents and my culture speaking that to me, or you're supposed to pray enough so it goes away. In my book, I go into more sort of exegesis for why I think that's a misread of Philippians 4:6. The most obvious reason is in Philippians 2:28. Earlier, Paul talks about his own anxiety. About his own anxiety about sending Epaphroditus back to the Philippian church. He says, so that my anxieties may be addressed. So it would be very odd if having just a few passages earlier, Paul saying, I'm anxious around this whole situation with Epaphroditus. He goes around and says, and if you're feeling anxious, you're sinning, right? So you shouldn't be anxious. So, and that's just one verse, but I think the most powerful biblical exegesis about anxiety is just to recognize that Jesus himself experienced anxiety. So all of the passages around his experience when he was about to confront loss, the loss of all losses, his death, he's in anguish. He has physical symptoms of anxiety. He's sweating so intensely that it's described, I think, metaphorically as sweating blood. Jesus is experiencing anxiety. Why? Because he's human. He is the one true human, right? And when human beings are about to or contemplating the possibility of loss in the future, they will experience anxiety. That is a natural human reaction that Jesus himself went through, not away or not around. He didn't pray it away, didn't make it go away. He went through it because that's what human beings are. And that's what true human beings do, is when contemplated with loss, the possibility of loss, we feel anxiety. And this is why it's important to distinguish anxiety from anxiety disorder, right? Anxiety is the natural human experience, often experienced physiologically or mentally in the face of impending loss. Jesus himself experienced it. Anxiety disorder is the inability to handle, to hold, to experience anxiety. This is why I love the title of this show, How to Handle Anxiety. Not how to make anxiety go away, but how to handle it, how to hold it, how to experience it. That's what human beings are invited to do, because it turns out that just like Jesus went through his anxiety with the Father, we too have the invitation to go through anxiety in Jesus with the Father and experience true transformation.
And that analogy or that scriptural reference is so powerful because, of course, Jesus was sinless. And he did experience that anxiety in Gethsemane. And really his resolution to that was not my will, but your will be done.
Right. Yeah.
And relate that to the solution, when you're having anxiety, the trust that we have in God's care for us, no matter our circumstances,
Yes.
that will bring you hopefully a place of peace and rest.
Right. And this is where it's so important to not label anxiety itself as a sin or a problem to make go away. Because if we say anxiety is a problem to go away, what we're really saying is loss is a problem to make go away, right? That loss itself is something that we should not experience.
Right.
And so if that's true, then we are going down a false gospel. Because what that means is we are then portraying God as the great sort of insurance scheme in the sky that's supposed to insure us from experiencing any loss, right? Because if anxiety equals loss, that means then we have to make loss go away if we're saying we're going to make anxiety go away.
But to a degree, isn't that our culture? I mean, we want all pain to
That's
go
right.
away. We want to bubble wrap the kids. We don't want them to get a boo-boo emotionally,
That's right.
physically. So we're kind of, as a culture, I would say we are dead set on protecting our kids at all costs, and I don't know that that's healthy.
Well, and I think the Christian culture has absorbed that and spiritualized that in unhelpful ways, where we expect that the answer to anxiety is to pray it away, which actually means you're supposed to pray that that loss that you fear does not happen, that God is going to protect you from that loss of job, the marital stress, your kids suffering, and so forth. And if that's true, then we're in trouble, because I think all of us who are Christians for a while have come to realize when we pray for loss to go away, which is a good, right thing, natural human thing to do, God does not answer every single one of them by saying, yes, I will insure you from facing that loss. Just like he did not, quote unquote, save the son from the loss that he experienced on the cross.
You mentioned a formula in the book. What's the formula with dealing with anxiety?
Well, I say anxiety equals loss times avoidance. So anxiety equals loss, right? Anxiety is what natural human reaction to the face of impending loss. We're going to experience anxiety because we're going to experience loss in our life, right? Unless we are so deluded that we think that somehow we're protected
It's
from
probably
that.
the lessons that God is showing us for eternal benefit.
So I say loss times avoidance, because the one thing we can make anxiety go higher, the multiplier effect, is if we actually try to make anxiety go away, try to make loss go away, if we try to avoid it, right? And there's nothing wrong with asking God, so, hey, please take this cup away from me. Jesus prayed that himself. But ultimately, we have to make that transition to say, but your will be done, right? So this is where, if we can transition from avoidance to actually holding, to actually where we can actually hold loss, manage it, handle it, suffer it.
What does that look like practically, though? I mean, you're dealing with this, you're a professor, this is what you're working with every day at the every person place.
Yeah.
What does that look like? In fact, I think you have some very practical tools to help us do that.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, I think my book sort of outlines, I think, a pathway we can follow.
Yeah, like naming the loss.
Naming is the loss is one of the most important things.
What does that sound like? Again, just help me, because I'm not sure I know what you're meaning.
Let me tell a story that illustrates this from my most intense experience of anxiety. So what happened was I replaced the founding pastor of a growing church. Never a great job, by the way, I've come to learn, because a lot of people are sort of have their eyes on you, and you feel this great pressure to measure up to the founder. I took over just at the same time that the .com bust hit Silicon Valley, so there was a massive exodus of people from the region, from the church, giving goes down, and I'm in my first year as the pastor.
A lot of stress.
Replacing, a lot of stress. But I had internalized, again, this framework that anxiety is a sin, a sign, or at least a sign of lack of faith. And how could your new pastor go ahead and confess that I don't have faith, right? Or I lack faith. So I just tried to work harder, do more work, couldn't name what really was going on. I couldn't name, this is because I am suffering from anxiety and anxiety about my performance and how all of you will think about me, right? So it's instead, I thought it's workload, it's a lot of more pressures and demands. So then I generally sleep around 7 hours a night. That went down to about 6, then 5, then 4. And again, I couldn't name this as actually, this is classic signs of anxiety, loss of sleep. Couldn't name it as such. Just kept naming it as, my body doesn't need as much sleep because it's ramping up to face this.
Yeah, meeting the challenge.
Meeting the challenge, exactly, that's right. And then my sleep went down to 4, then 3, 2, and then I went through a 2-week period where I do not remember consciously falling asleep at all. I must have had micro sleep.
Yeah.
because your body can't handle it. But I don't remember consciously falling asleep for 2 weeks in a row. And that is torture. That is like your mind starts fracturing. It's an intense form of suffering. And I got to that, and basically that I had a breakdown. And I actually had to leave the pastorate because I couldn't function anymore. It slid over into a deep depression. It got that bad because I could not name what was happening for me. And to name it is, actually, I'm feeling anxiety. I just had to push through. And that my coping mechanisms, my highly functioning strategies that had served me so well from 8 years old on, just broke down. And this is what can happen with people who seemingly are doing well because they have really high functioning coping mechanisms. But at some point, if they don't actually name and actually experience and deal with their underlying anxiety, it can lead to this kind of breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, that's a powerful story in terms of how to manage it and how to cope with it. You shared with us earlier, you went to counseling, you mentioned that, when you're dealing with that severe anxiety. When would you say it's time to get help? And what does that help look like?
Yeah. I think it's time to get help when it feels overwhelming, when you realize that I'm lacking the tools, I'm lacking the ability, or when you're feeling very alone, I think is another time to get really help. When you feel like things are very complex and you can't sort it out in your mind, having somebody else to help you be a listener and a mirror to you can be very helpful. So those are some of the common signs.
Curtis, one of the key pushbacks we will get, obviously, is how we integrate science, medication, and issues like anxiety. Address some of those common kind of theological and medical constraints that we suffer from in the Christian community.
Yeah. Well, I think mental health can be a very helpful tool to help us get our anxiety at a level where we can actually look at it. So, Psalm 139 says, "Search me and know my anxious thoughts." So this is a key part of how anxiety becomes an opportunity for spiritual growth, is when we can actually, in a invitation to God, invite him to help us know our anxious thoughts. What's really going on there? The challenge is sometimes anxious thoughts have gotten so big that they actually overwhelm us, that we can't actually even look at them. They're just a monster, or they're so unclear in our heads. And this is where I think therapy can help us look at it a little more clearly, and then a medication can help bring the monster back down to a little bit more manageable size.
But also to not feel guilty if that is what is needed.
100%, yeah. This is absolutely part of God's provision to humanity is medicine, and Christ is in all things. So done rightly, done with the right motivations, I think it's I've benefited from myself. The distinction I want to draw is that managing your anxiety, bringing it down to some manageable level, is not the same thing as spiritual growth. This is what secular mental health can't offer, is it can't actually offer anxiety as an opportunity for spiritual growth. It's still stuck it's a problem we have to either make go away or at least bring it down to manageable size. But it can't see it as an opportunity for spiritual growth, at least in the fully Christian sense. And this is where I think there's a helpful partnership between secular mental health and spiritual formation.
When you talk about being fully present, and describe that again so the person on the street can grab what you're saying, but being fully present, you say, allows the possibility of anxiety to be better managed.
That's right. It brings it down to size, because anxiety is the fear of future loss, right? Anxiety is the fear of something that's going to happen in a future scenario. This is why Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, says, don't worry about tomorrow. Come back today. Look at the lilies. Look at the birds. He's trying to bring his listeners back to the present, because what happens is anxiety. One way to think about anxiety, it's a hijacker. It's a mental hijacker that basically hijacks us from the present moment into the future. And because the future is unknown, in the future, once anxiety has hijacked you into that future state, it can spin all sorts of scenarios, like a burglar has broken into your house, right? Because that's a future scenario as an 8-year-old I'm spinning in my head. So one of the ways that we bring anxiety back down to size, that you can do without medication, right? Or with medication even, or as a partner, is to simply learn practices, spiritual practices that are ancient, Christian spiritual practices of leaving the future, of refusing to get hijacked in the future and coming back into the present with God. And things like breathing, meditation, scripture can be helpful in this. Nature can be very helpful as ways for us to actually get back to the present.
That's so true, Curtis. And I love these tools you've shared for people to get closer to Jesus through anxiety. It sounds contradictory, but it's not. Our fallen world can be a scary place, but God is faithful, so we don't have to live in fear. And to our listeners and viewers, I hope you were encouraged today and that you came away with a sense of peace, not fear. And some of you might feel like you are in a battle with anxiety every day. Or maybe you have a child who is struggling. If you could use some support, we have a team of caring Christian counselors right here for you. John will have those details in just a minute. And I want to encourage you to get a copy of this great book of Curtis's called The Anxiety Opportunity. It's full of practical tools to help you navigate anxiety. You can get a copy directly from Focus Canada. And when you do, the money from your purchase goes right back into the ministry to help families just like yours.
Yeah, you can set up a consultation with a counselor, donate, and request that book when you call 800, the letter A, and the word family, 800-232-6459, or look for the details at focusonthefamily.ca. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for listening to Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back tomorrow as we have more of the conversation with Curtis Chang and help you and your family thrive in Christ.
Do you need to review your life insurance coverage? Do you want to speak with a real person who can help shop to get the best price available? If you have 20 minutes, we can help you decide what's appropriate for you and help you apply. It's that easy. You know you need life insurance. We're here to help you get the peace of mind proper coverage can bring. Start by giving us a call at 705-734-5555 or email kevin.horner@asante.com. Horner Financial, planning with purpose.
Horner Financial thanks you for listening to Focus on the Family. Barry Vacuums and Computer Elite invite you to listen to Turning Point.
Do you need a reliable email solution for your business? Something secure using two-factor authentication that ensures you're sending and receiving emails with confidence. At Computer Elite, we'll get you and your business connected to the Microsoft Office 365 package that provides you with the security and reliability you need. We'll set everything up and even transfer your existing email from your other email system. Inquire today. One call. Computer Elite.
Vacuums, vacuums, vacuums.
Barry Vacuums, selling the best, repairing the rest.
Find top Canadian central vacuum brands.
Duovac, Beam, Cyclovac, Hayden.
The best portable vacuum cleaners.
German-made Miele, Sibo, and more.
Plus bagless and cordless stick vacs in stock at Barry Vacuums.
Commercial units by NaceCare, Ghibli, Johnny Vac, and Carpet Pro.
Bags, filters, and belts.
Barry Vacuums, 215 Mapleview Drive East.
BarryVacuums.com.